Good morning, everybody. I'm excited to be coming to you today from beautiful Mountain View, Arkansas. We are camping out by Sylamore Creek, and it's gorgeous. You know, I've been telling you in all of our videos, get out and enjoy this beautiful weather and get out and enjoy God's nature when we can. Because sometimes, you know, we really need to stop and focus and look at all He's created to remember that we're just a tiny little thing in His universe, a tiny little thing in His world. So I'm going to read our story of the week. Our story is David and Goliath. And I know you probably, what do you remember about David and Goliath? What do you know about that story? We know Goliath is a big, mighty giant, and David was just a boy. And so I'm going to read the story, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit. Several years had passed from when David had been anointed by Samuel. And so King Saul and his army were once again trying to take over and fight the Philistines. When David arrived at the Israelite camp, things began to change. The Philistines were a warlike people who lived along the Mediterranean coast. So this means that the Philistines, they liked to fight. When it says warlike, that means that they were always up for a challenge. They didn't want anyone getting in their way. The Philistines continually raided Israelite territory, and they tried to take over and expand more of their borders. They wanted to have it all, okay? They wanted to take over all of it. The Philistines had a tremendous advantage over Israel because they were controlled by the iron industry. That means that iron is something that our earth produces that people need, and so people were mining it. Well, they wanted it all, so they knew if they held that land, they could hold that resource. I know this is kind of a deep lesson today, isn't it? But the reason they wanted that iron is that's what they made their swords out of, that's what they made their weapons out of. So they wanted that iron so that they could help produce more weapons to take over more land. During this event, they were face to face, and here again, they thought they had another advantage over Israel, because right now, they had Goliath on their side. Goliath was over 9 feet tall. So let's think about this. How many of you know Mr. Gary at our church? Mr. Gary is a very tall man, Mr. Gary Wareham. He's a tall person. He's played basketball. He's the one who helps make sure that all of our volleyball and all of our activities in the gym go smoothly. Well, Mr. Gary is really tall, but he's not 9 feet tall. And so everyone was afraid. Not only was he 9 feet tall, he was huge, and he wore armor that covered almost his entire body to protect him. So this is where the story gets really interesting. At this point, David was just a shepherd. He was just a young man, a young boy, and he was small. He didn't have any iron on. He didn't have any major weapons. He didn't have a sword. And so there's Goliath, this 9-foot giant, covered in armor with his sword, and there's David. David didn't have any of those major weapons. All he did, he had a sling and some smooth stones. Now, what happens when what do you think is going to happen? Goliath just did exactly what any other bully would do. He laughed at David, and he made fun of him, and he thought, what can you do, kid? You've just got 5 little stones, and here I am covered in iron metal, and here I've got my sword. Well, David took his sling, and he took the stones, and he started to swing it and swing it and swing it and swing it, and he swung, and it hit Goliath in the head. And so David, he actually took down the giant, and nobody thought he could. That's an awesome story about how even people who we don't suspect have greatness in them. David was appointed by God, and God knew that he could carry off this mission. He had that special inside of him. And so that's one thing that's really awesome, is that sometimes we look at people and we discredit them, and we think, oh, what can they offer? What can they do? Or sometimes we think that about ourselves. And really, God knows what's inside of us. And God knew that David was up for the challenge. So even though he was just a young, small boy, facing someone that was more than 9 feet tall and a bully, David won. So that's a good example about how little people can make a big difference. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I hope you stay safe. Parents, of course, this story and the activities are available as downloadable PDFs from the church email, or of course they're underneath the portico. I hope you have a great weekend. Love you all and see you soon.